Good morning, everyone. I'm Hamid Fawzi Behzad, and on behalf of the British University of Bahrain, I'm happy to welcome you to the BUB channel, and specifically our latest and exclusive program, the BUB Roundtable podcast. I'm joined here today by His Excellency Roddy Drummond, the British Ambassador to Bahrain. I thank you very much for accepting our humble invitation and for officially opening up our channel. Sabah al-khair.
Sabah al-Noor. Thank you very much, Hamad. I'm really excited by this venture and this first podcast by BUB.
Thank you very much. I'd also like to take this opportunity to welcome the students with us today. We have Ayman and Al-Juri from the Property and Real Estate students. So good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here today. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank His Excellency, the Chairman of the Board of Trustees of BUB, Professor Keith, our President, Professor Julie, our Vice President, for the continued support that they've offered ourselves and the students, and praise them, to be honest with you, for their efforts in creating this oasis for innovation, uniqueness, and excellence, which is the BUB that we know. Ambassador, before we kick off, I think it's very important to discuss the purpose of our podcast, because I think with COVID, there has been a lot of podcasts kicking up. Anybody with a camera, microphone, and an internet connection seems to be having their own channel. So the question is, what's different to our program? It goes back to our approach to education. We noticed early on at the BUB that we have enough and rich academic content to build minds, but where is the content to build characters? And that was quite fundamental for the, let's say, the evolvement of our students here in Bahrain. So what we noticed as well is the students had a lot of knowledge, but they lacked local outlook. So we had the rich British curriculum, but we lacked the use of it, let's say, in a practical sense, application sense. So what happened? We began with the students actually visiting officials, ministers, CEOs, and ambassadors to basically find out more about themselves, what they do, and how did they get to the positions that they basically hold today. Because as you know, nobody gets parachuted into their position. It's a quite an interesting process, which a lot can be learned from. And this could be brought to, let's say, another element that we basically share here is education and knowledge as a whole. It's a very selfless trait. And it's another word in Arabic we say, sadaqat al-ilm, or let's say the charity of education. In other words, giving back. So we felt two objectives that we basically had. Is the first one is we felt selfish being able to be exclusively in front of these officials, gaining this insight in a very small group. So we felt a platform to basically share this insight on a more grander scale was very important. The second aspect we also noticed as well, the most socially active age group, let's say between 18 to 35, they struggle to comprehend, let's say, things going around them or matters going around them, usually probably due to the language of jargon surrounding official statements, reports, or whatever it is. And what happens in that case, instead of developing their own understanding, they begin adopting them from people around them. And I believe everybody should have the opportunity to developing their own understanding in this world. The third objective I thought of this morning, well, sadly, Larry King has passed away, and Piers Morgan seems like he's not coming back, so there was a gap to basically fill, and we're here to basically fill it. So I thank you again for being here today, and hope we will be able to be informative and helpful to our viewers. Your Excellency, I'll start at the beginning with yourself. Obviously, we all know His Excellency Roddy Drummond, but we'd like to know Roddy Drummond himself, the Scottish Roddy Drummond, and more about your early beginnings, your place of birth, your growing up, stories that basically stand out.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, I think this is a fantastic initiative because I get most of my news and new ideas these days from podcasts and listening to new things to get a different frame of reference. And I think young people these days have got the access to and can find things that I can't find. And if we can help them frame that, then I think this is really important. So I grew up in Dundee in Scotland, and I spent the first 18 years of my life there. Just a pretty straightforward childhood. I was into sports and a variety of other hobbies and so on. I was at school. Rugby was probably my big thing that I took with me to university. And I went to Edinburgh, which is about an hour away from Dundee for university. And that was, I suppose, when I really started to open up my horizons and get different perspectives, because it was and is a very international city and a very international university. And so I was suddenly being challenged in seminars and in classes by colleagues with very different perspectives. And that was really instrumental in opening me up, I think.
Right, brilliant. So that would say the transformational side. So that kind of experience and exposure that we always sort of talk about. It's always key, and I say this to students a lot, because they worry about what have they studied, and they feel that's it, that will sort of create their life, and they're sort of concreted by that. So, early days, did you ever think you'd be an ambassador? Did you have an ambition of being in the diplomatic corps, or was this completely... What did you want to be when you were younger?
I went to university to study physics, and I did a whole year of studying science, and I really enjoyed some aspects of that, but there were other aspects I didn't enjoy. And then I went back to begin again at university studying history, which was something I enjoyed more than I enjoyed science. So I had sort of a little crisis and a change of direction at that point. But I didn't think of becoming a diplomat until near the very end of university. I'd gained a huge amount in confidence and skills, also by being in the army and the reserves at that point. And I think it was the international aspect of being a diplomat, the opportunity to go overseas and get under the skin of different societies and politics and so on, that really appealed at that stage, and has continued to appeal ever since.
Absolutely. We talk a lot about here at the university is to achieve certain ambitions, and especially at the peak, you have to build capacity. And capacity comes in many forms. It comes in skills, it comes in interest, passion, all of that. How do you feel when you did feel that at the end of university, that you started to build up capacity? Was it just language, or what else did you sort of put into place?
So I felt I had the self-confidence to project myself. I felt I was at the top of my game. But I think one of the big things I saw when I went down to London and joined the Foreign Office, which was quite a forbidding institution in many ways, full of incredibly bright people, and suddenly you start again. It's like going from junior school to high school, and you're suddenly feeling, do I have what it takes? Yes. And that lasted a long time, and I still feel it today sometimes. Every time I change job within my organization, I am challenged, and I challenge myself by sort of starting afresh. And it's you have to go through those uncomfortable phases to grow.
Yes.
And so it's natural to feel lack of self-confidence, and there's areas you don't know enough, and you've got to continue to learn.
Yes.
So I've changed jobs within the Foreign Office every 3 or 4 years, and it's taken me in some new directions that I'd never thought of before.
Yes.
So that for me has stayed the interest that it offers me something new every 3 or 4 years.
Right. Well, we go on to talk about hobbies. Any specific hobbies, pastimes?
So I played rugby, not to a very high standard, but I then became a rugby coach a bit later in life. Coached a youth team for 4 years, coached an adult team for 3 years, and learned a lot by that process of having to impart knowledge and also impart values and so on, and create a structure that people could grow in. Yes. So I've quite enjoyed at different times doing work that involves coaching and so on, not just in a sporting context, but also in work. So that's been key. I finally hung up my rugby boots when I was in my mid-40s, when I had most of my own teeth and my knees still worked. But that was important for a long time. And history. Wherever I've been, I felt it's really important to understand that both the current affairs and look back a bit. You don't have to look back 3,000 years, but at least understand the last 20 or 50 of where you are. And therefore where you might go from here. True. So those have been my passions, I think.
Right. When we talk about football, any interest in football?
So
English, Scottish Premiership?
I'm not a big football fan.
Right.
My father follows Dundee, so I do follow them a bit.
Right.
I'm very excited that Scotland are back in the Euro Championships for the first time in about 20 years.
Right. Okay. So
hope springs eternal if you're a Scotland supporter.
Okay.
It'll probably all end in tears, but hey.
Well, I'm very similar to you. I never felt an association with any specific team, but when I moved over to the UK, I chose them purely on my favourite colour. So when I was living in London, I went with Chelsea. Never followed the game or can even name a single player, but that was that. And when I moved up to Scotland, I decided to go with the Rangers. Right. And I had a bit of an issue with the Rangers because I had a Rangers T-shirt, or football jersey, should we say, and one day I decided to give it a wash. And all I can say safely is if the Rangers are looking for a new design for their T-shirt, they're more happy come to take mine. They just have to reimburse me the damages that caused that in the making. But that was my short, should I say, interest in supporting football. Well, it's an interesting time this week as well, Ambassador, because we have the F1 in town, or that. So, any specific team? I know you wear a McLaren mask.
I wear my McLaren mask a lot. I mean, that's a great example of UK-Bahrain collaboration, and it's one of the teams. Many of the teams have quite a sort of romantic history to them. So it's had its good times and bad times, and I think it's on its way back. So I like McLaren, but I'm also following Aston Martin, who are back in the paddock, and of course Lewis Hamilton is a fantastic young man, a real role model for so many people in different walks of life. So although he's driving for Mercedes, I follow him very closely.
Other than, or should I say specific drivers, Lewis Hamilton, others as well?
So, I've followed in the past when I was growing up, some of the great racing drivers. I was lucky enough once to meet the great Sir Jackie Stewart, who was a world champion many years, and again, someone who I think still does some work around the sport. But Lewis is clearly the man to beat.
Yes,
I think.
I think on this trip, I think he's challenging Michael Schumacher's title of winnings in Bahrain as well. So that should be an interesting race coming up this weekend.
And I was very lucky about a year ago to have a chance to drive the circuit.
Right. Okay.
So someone lent me a McLaren for a few minutes, and I did a few laps on the circuit, which was absolutely amazing.
So a question I've heard before, is it true ambassadors don't drive?
It depends where you are.
Right, okay.
So in some places we're not allowed to for security reasons, and we're driven around everywhere, and that's quite constraining, because I've always, throughout my career, just got off and explored odd corners of any given country. So I'm glad to say that, security situation has improved a bit here, so I do occasionally get to drive.
Right. Well, it's good. You've got, the lovely BIC for track days, you've got the karting circuit and other facilities as well, so you're in safe hands, and I think Bahrain, when it comes to driving and motorsports, is right. It's
Absolutely.
a mecca of motorsports in the region.
Yes.
Ambassador, I'll start involving the students, and I'll begin with Al-Juri, who basically has questions related to, let's say, the beginning of your tenure in Bahrain 18 months ago, I believe you mentioned, and a few questions about that. So, Al-Juri, please.
First of all, it's truly an honor to finally meet Your Excellency, especially that Dr. Hamid has been speaking so highly of you these past months. My question is, each ambassador has a direction that reflects back directly on the embassy. Some ambassadors are fond of charity events, politics, military, or even education. So if I may ask, what are your current direction that reflects directly back to the embassy, foreign policy aside?
Thank you, Al-Juri. The pleasure is mine. Thank you very much for the question. So I think we often feel that we're rather like the conductor of an orchestra, because we've got a lot of things going on, and the more things you're going on, the better. And thankfully, Bahrain and the UK have got a lot of things going on. So you mentioned, things like economic collaboration. There's a lot of interesting stuff going on there. We have the military and security collaboration. That's important too. But there's culture, there's education. BUB, of course, is a great example of that. And we're always looking for more. And I think, even coming out of the COVID crisis, it's reinforced the need for more scientific collaboration, for investment in health sciences, for looking at things that were previously regarded as maybe less important or less glamorous. We now realize the importance of those and thinking long term. We're even seeing a bit of collaboration in space between Bahrain and the UK. So that our door is not closed in any field. We really are always looking to see where we can add a bit of value, where government can facilitate things, bring in people from the private sector, bring in people from academia, and challenge them. Say, well, okay, how far can you take this? And then once you've done that, can you take it a bit further? So we're in the business of trying to get more exchanges going in every field. But I think COVID has challenged us. So that's one of the things that I think will the aftermath of that is clearly going to shape our collaboration and strengthen it over the next few years.
Absolutely. I think, as you said, Ambassador, there's a lot of changes that are happening during COVID that has maybe changed the course of action, maybe even certain cooperation between the two countries. And it's a stick in the wheel that I hope we get past quickly. But I think I wouldn't say it was a distraction. I'd say the attention, or should I say the subjects of cooperation have changed. For, let's say, more scientific, we talk about the vaccine, we look at the Oxford vaccine, all the collaboration that's done. It's one of the biggest, let's say, distributed vaccines here as well, or part of the main 5. So I think there's a lot of different kind of interactions. Probably we did miss out on the social interactions, the Ramadan majlises, and which is a great break into Bahraini society.
On which I sadly Ramadan was curtailed last year, and I think it probably will be this year too. So we have tried, myself, my team, my family, to get out and meet as many people as possible within the constraints of COVID. So I hope we can get back to that more free and easy interaction, because when we've been in to see Bahraini families and started to make real friendships, it's been very heartwarming, feels very strong. You know, my wife, for example, is an artist, and she has really enjoyed getting to know artists here and showing her work to people. That's been a bit constrained because of COVID, but again, COVID has reminded us of the importance of culture, of the importance of spending our own personal time to do that kind of thing, whether it's music, whatever it might be.
Ambassador, you talked about family, and we always say with diplomats it's a big challenge in terms of adjustment, yourself, your family, every 4 years. Yep. It's an ongoing job. How do you feel you have adjusted, and more importantly, Mrs. Drummond, how do you think she's adjusted to it?
Right, I've got the easy job. Right? So I arrive somewhere, and people usually want to know me, and I get introductions to lots and lots of people. It's one of the difficulties of diplomatic life, and perhaps anyone who does a mobile career around the world, that families have to go through similar adjustments, and they don't have the same sort of easy introductions. And I'm very fortunate that my wife really enjoys the travel and really gets into wherever society we're in. But it's been difficult at times for my children growing up and having to move school so frequently. And there were some difficult adjustments at times, and others that they really, really enjoyed. They've all settled in different corners of the world, some in the UK, some in the Middle East, and they're doing different things. So they've all got through it. But it is a challenge, and it's something that we all have to remember. In whatever field you're in, you've got to spend that time taking the family with you there, and spending more time on that than you instinctively might think at the outset.
Yes. Ambassador, you talked about adjustment, and if we were going to put the two together, adjustment and COVID, how do you feel you used this year? Is there any aspects you neglected when you had less time that you kind of focused on when you had more of it?
Yeah, no, we did a lot of reflection and then activities and things about a year ago when the first lockdown period started and restrictions came in, and we did think about a lot what we could do personally, what we could do to keep the energy in the relationship across the embassy team, who are from different departments, different cultures, and everything else. So we did a lot of things at that time that involved showing off how we were doing our home cooking and trying these kind of things, different recipes, and sharing these kind of reflections. And that's something we need to continue to do, because it fell off for a period. I have not used the time as well as I should have done. I've not written that book that I want to write. I've not learned to play the saxophone. The things that I thought that I should have used this last year for. So we all get distracted by different things, and again, I think we've all had to spend more time refreshing our family ties and our ties with colleagues, because it's been a difficult year for everybody, and a lot of people are under particular strain, a lot of loneliness in the world and that kind of thing, and so reaching out to family members even when you can't see them directly, face to face, that's taken up quite a lot of time over this last year.
I think you're absolutely right, Ambassador. I think it was, or it is still to some extent, a time of reflection. And I think we reflect upon many things. We reflect on the importance of time. And I think even as people, what is our strength? We feel like we're unbeatable and we have power over the world or our lives. And the reality is, no, a single vaccine in the form of a flu has shaken the world, or knocked the world sideways, should I say. So it's a very interesting period of time, which we hope we get through as well. I'll take another question from the students. So now I'll move over to Ayman, another property and real estate student, who would like to ask His Excellency another question. Ayman, if you will, please.
It's a great honor to have you today with us, Your Excellency. Thank you for accepting our invitation and giving us some of your precious time. My first question is, it has been now 5 years since the Brexit referendum. A lot has been said, a lot of media. So to some extent, we have lost our minds in terms of what is Brexit and how will it impact the United Kingdom and their allies. This is my first question. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and the honour's mine to be here and share this time with you. So Brexit has happened finally. It took it longer than we had wanted to finally give effect to it, but that has now happened, and we are now in a new relationship with our former partners in the EU, and we now have the time to look to the wider horizon. And that creates huge opportunities, particularly in places like Bahrain and with our other partners in the Gulf, who we've got very strong relationships with in many fields, as I mentioned already. But we need to do more. There are opportunities to do more. So we're talking what that might mean in trade, investment, in education, in collaboration in healthcare and life sciences and all these sort of kind of things. We've just published a big review of our foreign security, defence, development policy, which sets out where we want to go in the next 30 years. And for this part of the world, it means you'll be seeing more of us, not less. And we're very excited by the opportunities that the Brexit creates with our partners here. And we know we have very willing partners here in Bahrain and in this part of the world to help take these things to the next level. So it's a very exciting time. The uncertainty of exactly what Brexit was going to mean is behind us, and we can now look forward. And of course, a country like Bahrain, to some degree, always dealt with the UK as the UK, not as a part of the EU. So there'll be a lot of continuity. But it's up to us. It's up to my team here in the embassy and the British government and the British academic sector and the private sector and the third sector to work out what more we can do in this next phase. We don't have any constraints on our action.
Ambassador, I believe with relationship with the UK, especially when it comes to free trade agreements and all of that, I believe it could be more of a liberating factor, the exit of the UK out of the EU, because I believe the region, or Bahrain specifically, has been discussing an FTA with the European Union since 2002 or 2003. So I believe this is quite a liberating aspect as well. We also have the opportunity of new types of visas, I believe, even for Bahrainis going over to the UK who are students, who are able. Could you elaborate probably a bit more on that aspect?
So on the trade side, we're going through a joint trade and investment review, which concludes in June. Together with our GCC partners, there's a lot of intensive discussion going on to work out what is the best way to create better frameworks that improve the options for trade and investment in both directions. And so I think you'll see a lot of new things coming through there. In terms of the visas, yes, we've announced already a new student route for visas, which should make it easier for people to get visas and study in the UK. And one key bit of that, which I think is of real interest in Bahrain, is that people who graduate in the UK will be able to apply to stay and work for another 2 years to get that first professional experience in a UK body. So I think that's a lot of interest. But there's a whole review of the border going on, which is going to open up the exchanges with all countries, looking at global talent. So we want more exchanges in business, in science, and everything else with this part of the world and the world. Again, post-Brexit, we need to be open to the world and getting out there, and we need people to come into the UK. We depend on global talent for the success of institutions and firms in the UK. So I think it's an exciting time.
It is, because I believe with the UK exiting Europe, I think probably some people got the wrong gist that we're kind of creating barriers, and I think it's the opposite, eliminating barriers to, as you said, attract a certain caliber of talent, of migration, to actually build a center or continue the center of excellence and uniqueness. You need a certain caliber instead. Before we move on, I think we have another question with Brexit. Ayman?
My second question, Your Excellency, was about the free trade agreements. So it has been asked by Mr. Hamad. So my question will be, will the Brexit affect the foreign affairs of the United Kingdom with their allies in the MENA region, and especially Bahrain?
So, as part of the integrated review that we announced last week, which sets out our vision for our foreign policy in the world and our security and defence policy in the world for the next 10 years, we're also refreshing our strategy towards the Gulf and the Middle East. And again, I think what that means in general is you're going to see more collaboration, not less. This is a key part of the world for the UK. We have so many strong links here already. There's reference in the integrated review to a tilt to the Indo-Pacific. Well, how do you get to the Indo-Pacific from the UK? You come through this part of the world. And so the collaborations that we have here are vital to, this is a vital node in the world that connects East and West. And so the UK is going to be very heavily invested in diplomacy, in policy in this part of the world. So more, not less, is the summary of where we're going to be on that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Ambassador, I believe there's a lot of collaborations that are basically taking place between Bahrain and the UK, and we've seen yourself meeting with a lot of delegations and a lot of officials in Bahrain as well. Is there any specific collaboration or projects that you can basically discuss or shed some light on, please?
So we had a very good visit last week by the Trade Minister, and as I say, that's taken forward the discussions on trade. And I think we'll have further announcements related to future trade arrangements later this year. We might be having a summit that later in the year that takes that forward as well. We've got a meeting coming up with our joint working group, which reviews our collaboration government to government across the piece. And again, we see the government to government relations as a way of liberating, facilitating private sector, third sector collaborations. So, if people have ideas that there's things we should be doing more of, then let us know. We're also, I think we've used the time of COVID to try and reach out to British nationals here and keep in touch with them through social media and that kind of thing, and reassure them about management of COVID here and that kind of thing, because we want there to be strong, vibrant British communities in many places in the world, including Bahrain. Yes. So there's a bit more consular support going on, a lot of it online. Yes. My challenge would be to your students, as they come through these courses and they work out what they want to do at the next phase. I hope we're going to see, more tech companies coming through, more joint ventures with, British and Bahraini talent working together. So that's the kind of thing we want to see, and we will work to encourage.
Absolutely. We were discussing actually a meeting with the students with His Excellency Zaid Zayani, the Minister of Industry, Commerce and Tourism, and he was saying just that. He said when it comes to this kind of relationship, it doesn't matter whether a British company is investing into Bahrain or Bahraini company is investing into the UK. It's at least we have that kind of relationship going on. Yes. As well. And I think once you mentioned COVID and let's say the situation of ensuring everybody's fine, I think we take this opportunity as well to raise praise about the efforts of Team Bahrain, His Majesty the King Hamad, about all what was offered, should I say, to Bahrainis and residents here in Bahrain, and under the leadership of Team Bahrain with His Royal Highness the Crown Prince and Prime Minister, Prince Salman bin Hamad, on all the efforts that have been taking place to basically ensure that residents and citizens are covered with vaccines and so on. Your Excellency,
and if you haven't yet, take a jab. It doesn't hurt, minor side effects, and it protects you, protects your community and family, and protects everybody.
Absolutely, absolutely. I believe it's time to become, let's say, reasonable and more outward-looking in terms of protecting yourself and families, and I think that's absolutely key at this time. Your Excellency, we'll move on to another topic, which is basically, let's say, we've talked about maybe in your case specifically opportunities and challenges, but in a more broader sense to diplomats and what kind of takes place in terms of opportunities and challenges being stationed out in different parts of the world, the challenges that they may face, and how do you believe yourself or other diplomats have built capacity?
So I think, again, we've had to look at this afresh because of COVID. If you'd said a year ago that you want to do, all 90% of your work online, we'd have thought, well, we could do that for a few weeks, but we've had to do it now for a year, and we'll have to continue to do that, a lot of that, for quite a bit longer, I think. So we've had to adapt to how we deliver what we do. But it doesn't take away from the core of being a diplomat anywhere, is understanding the society, the culture, the politics of where you are, and getting to know people. Getting to know where are the areas that you can make a difference and that you can make connections between your country and your host country when you're overseas. And that we have deliberately, I think, in the last, in the last 5 years or so, the expertise on that isn't in some remote head office somewhere. There's no magic brain in London that understands the world. The real expertise is in our embassy teams overseas, and we need to keep them dynamic and working and engaging to keep that knowledge current. And it includes people from all departments. So I have 6 departments here in the embassy directly, and I have other departments that work through us here. Some embassies have more than that. So it's not just Foreign Office. We often find ourselves working on technical aspects of trade, on issues around security collaboration, on issues around culture. The British Council is a really important part of our team overseas, and we work very closely with them here and support what they do in culture and education and so on. So, but that, each of our embassies needs to be a hub of knowledge and expertise that stays current, that gives the right advice to our ministers and officials back home, who then can put it in a sort of broader context. And that puts even more value in having people overseas who get out or engage with people online where there are COVID constraints and listen. Because so much, we do a bit of broadcast. We have things that we want, that we think are the right things to do, so we do a bit of broadcasting. But you're only going to persuade people, whether it's me persuading the government of Bahrain or something, or business people that it's the right venture, by listening to what their concerns are and working out where the sweet spot is, where's the area where you have a common interest and can take it forward. So you start with that, the trust as well. That's really important. We have to keep building trust, but then looking for where that joint collaboration can be. That's what my team do, all of the time.
Yes. Ambassador, you talked about, let's say, the scope of being a diplomat, but for those watching us who are aspiring diplomats, the pros and cons?
So I think it's mostly opportunity. I mean, there are times, perhaps in some postings, where you have particular challenges. It may challenge you personally in terms of security or in other ways. Living conditions are not easy everywhere in the world. We're very fortunate in Bahrain in that respect, and in terms of medical facilities and so on. But if you're prepared to put up with some discomfort from time to time, the huge opportunities to be at the heart of something, to be sometimes behind the scenes, instrumental. It's not usually our job to be in the headlines every day and claiming stuff. That's for celebrities and people like that. We're there to try and move stuff forward in ways that are to everyone's advantage. But you get to meet amazing people. I've in my past postings met Nelson Mandela, who was when he was still alive, and various other world leaders who have been amazing, close to, and I hope my 2 cents in the conversation was able to help move something forward. And you do meet celebrities, Sir David Attenborough, because we're involved in climate science. Yes. And we're that's one of our biggest priorities for this period. We've got a big conference coming up in Glasgow in November, which is the next big global conference to try and raise the ambition to really make progress in the next couple of decades on climate change issues. So when you get a chance to have a dinner with David Attenborough, life doesn't get better than that. Really. He's an amazing man.
Absolutely. Ambassador, when we talk about, let's say, the build-up to diplomacy or becoming a diplomatic official, Do you feel the capacity, such as learning Arabic, sets you on a certain path? Do you think these kind of smaller skills, I wouldn't say small, but should I say, skills put you on a certain trackway?
So I think we take the approach that we want the smartest, most inquiring minds in diplomacy. So we take people from any background and from any academic background, and we take people who have not been to university and develop them through an apprenticeship scheme as well. And sometimes they rise to become quite senior diplomats. But we take people who've done chemistry or politics or whatever at university. And then we will add in further skills as they need them as they go through the career, and which languages is a vitally important part. We need people to acquire a serious level of language to really understand different cultures and engage, in different places. Just because a lot of people speak English doesn't mean that in any given country that a diplomat can understand it without watching the local news, going to the local parliament, listening to the exchanges in that language. So I think, again, that's one of the great things in our careers, and I know other diplomatic services the same, that you have to learn these other things that go on, and suddenly you might get a new posting in your 40s or 50s, and you've suddenly got to learn Korean or Thai or something, and well, what a privilege.
Yes.
And I have to say as well, older people like me can learn things at that age, although it's maybe easier for you young people.
Yes. It's something I press on a lot with students, and I always say the opportunity you have now, which is unparalleled, the fact that you are below 30. When you're below 30, I said, I see you as like ready mix or cement, which hasn't set yet. And I believe it's an opportunity to add skills and add good habits and remove any bad habits. Language is being another one, working out, whatever, reading, I say all that, but, I don't do some of them. But this is all in essence of basically what it's all about. We talked about the capacity itself that diplomats basically build. And you talked about language. And I think it's absolutely key because I believe even in Bahrain, knowing Arabic puts you into kind of all levels of society. I was watching on social media a couple of years ago about diplomats going into the villages, and just because they were able to speak Arabic, they were able to easily integrate into local society as well. And I think that's the great part about it.
And it's also, I've experienced that in rural Jordan and rural Syria, getting out and about and understanding what's going on. And suddenly you're invited to somebody's wedding that you've never met before.
Yes.
Or you're in a conversation in a majlis somewhere, and there's an older person in the group, an older uncle of the family who is only comfortable in Arabic. And so being able to get into conversation with them, you learn a lot from that. And people realize that you are genuinely interested in getting deeper conversations and deeper relationships on which you then, you can then build other things.
Absolutely.
So it has a huge, and everyone can learn languages.
Yes.
Everyone can learn, 3 or 4 languages.
Yes.
It's just a question of putting the time in and having the motivation to do it.
That's actually right. So I was actually, about languages and diplomats, I was in a majlis a couple of years ago with my father, and there was a gentleman standing next to us in a suit. And I was like turning around to my father and I said, I wonder who he is. And he just said, Safir al-Rusi. I said, right, now we know who he is. So it does, as I said, it does help a lot. I'll go back to the students, and I'll go to Jury, if possible, to get her second question, if possible. Julie, please, go ahead.
Your Excellency, do you believe that the ambassador has to keep pace with the current developments that are happening within a country, or keep pace with trendy topics? For instance, we are in a pandemic, sadly. Is the ambassador imposed to comment or even talk about COVID-19 vaccinations or even COVID-19 in general?
Absolutely. We've all had to learn words we couldn't pronounce before, vaccinology and epidemiology and so on. So we have to be absolutely current, because you end up in detailed conversations with a company or with a government department or a minister, and you have to be at least their equal in terms of understanding of the technique. So you're constantly having to be rebriefed, and that's again, I've got a very good team who can help me with that. So I don't have to do it all myself, but I need to be able to turn to somebody in my team and say, what's the latest on this? and they will be up to speed, and they will have been doing that research, and they can give me an update which enables me to then help push things forward. Or we're in a meeting somewhere, I will turn to one of the younger or junior members of my team and say, can you explain? And bring them into the conversation. Because if they're the expert, when we're getting very technical on something, then the minister or whoever it is we're talking to needs to hear from them, not me. So it's and it happens. It's happened all throughout my career in so many different spheres, which again is one of the fascinating things, because you get to see a bit behind the scenes on everything. You get to be a little bit ahead of the news, and hopefully you can make things happen. Some of them you get the credit for, and some you don't. Sometimes you're explaining why something hasn't happened as quickly as everyone would like. But that's one of the interests, that you suddenly have to become an expert for a period, for a few months, or in this case a year, on things like vaccines and different therapeutic treatments for COVID and so on. Which is where the podcasts come in.
Yes.
There's a series of podcasts that I listen to on the science, and it's great. Again, having studied science for a few years at university, having enough of a scientific brain to be able to understand. I recommend anything by Professor Larry Brilliant, who is one of the world's experts on vaccines and that kind of stuff. And
Students, any other questions or follow-ups? Okay, it seems fine from their side. Ambassador, we talked about a range of things, and you're absolutely right with the essence of or importance of podcasts. And I think this is where universities come into play, and especially with the UK universities, which I've been used to, which is the university is always the center of discussions and trends, and it's always in the middle of all these different spheres, whether it's political, economic, diplomatic, or whatever it is. So I believe it's an essential part to play with universities for students to become more well-rounded. So I think that's absolutely key. From yourself, I think we learn a lot this morning, especially in terms of approach, in terms of we talk a lot about building capacity. We talk about people's run-up to certain positions. And I think this is key, because people always come and say, well, I've studied banking, I've studied architecture, does that mean I have to stay with this? It's a sense of worry that you will have to stick to this for 40, 50 years of your life and talk about it. So I think it's very key where, as long as you're building capacity, it doesn't matter. It's a degree that you have to have. It's an approach to life, let's say. Any remarks from Your Excellency before we end off?
Yeah, I think lifelong learning is something that I think has always been important, and perhaps we just didn't call it that before. But in my career, many of the examples of the best colleagues I've had, or the best people I've worked with in the private sector, or whatever, have been people who have challenged themselves and reinvented themselves, maybe gone in different directions, or just really updated themselves on something. I really admire people who've done additional formal studies while working, at different stages in their careers, and then you see the benefit later. It's a long game. We're all, I hope, going to live to ripe old ages of, the life expectancy now is much longer than it was some time ago. And so we're probably not going to retire at 60 or whatever it was in the past. We're going to continue working part-time, doing things into later life. You need that mental agility. And so all that stuff that you do early on that you might drop for 5 years or so, you'll pick it up again. It'll become useful again, or it will help you in developing an approach to something else. It might not be the same discipline, but it'll just help you in tackling that. So that approach, being open to doing these kind of things. You can learn that other language. I could learn how to play the saxophone. These kind of things. I just need to have the motivation and the time, and then do it. There's nothing stopping me. Don't put limits on yourself is the other thing. And don't be afraid to challenge. That's one of the strongest things we have I think, in our approach in our organization, is that we want junior people to challenge senior people. I am regularly told by my team that I've got something wrong, a little bit wrong or a lot wrong, and that's fine, because I've picked up something falsely, or I've got the wrong arguments on something. I need to hear that, We need to encourage that culture of challenge. And then from ourselves, we need to be prepared to stand up and ask a question in a formal or informal setting, and have that discussion. It could be at home with your family. No, Father, I don't want to do this. I'd rather do something else. But be prepared to challenge. In a good way.
You're absolutely right, Ambassador. I believe that's the approach that we kind of stress on with the students as well, is there doesn't need to be a transactional route that we all follow, just like a factory supply chain. And I think this is where the beauty actually comes, that difference. And we always say it at university here, differences should be celebrated, not criticized. And I think this is key that we always like looking at, and it's clear from your career as well. I'd like to thank you for being here with us today. This is your second home, BUB, and we're always happy to have you here and back on our show as well. But thank you very much for being here, and thank you for being our first guest to officially open the program. Thank you.
Hamid, it's my pleasure. Thank you very much. I've really enjoyed every interaction I've had with BUB, and I'm so impressed that it has a little slice of that British University magic here, and you've got a great student body. They're smart young people who are going to go places, and who are challenging you and others in the university to, So it's got a great atmosphere. I'm really pleased it's doing so well.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Your Excellency, and thank you very much. Hope to see you soon. Take care.
Thank you.